So what do you do on a gap year? You know, you may have some ideas if you've gone to a gap year fair or other type of, if you've done some online research, you probably have some ideas about what one can do. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to showcase in different student stories how these different opportunities look in practice. But what we have here is these different categories. And within these categories are literally thousands of things that you can do on your gap year. Now, one of the things that I think is important to understand is that most people do multiple things over the course of their gap year, and they delineate their time in chunks, if you will. So some people will break it up by semester like you would school. So you have your summer, your fall, your winter, your spring, and your following summer. Other times people will do things by the month or by groups of months or things like that. Most people come home for the holidays. There's that natural kind of break point for some time at home in the middle of the year. So a lot of times people are going away from home, coming back for a little while, going away again, coming back, and incorporating multiple things over the course of their year. So we have volunteering, which is pretty self-explanatory, service to others. This can be in the form of working with people in community development. It can also be working in the environment and wildlife and ecosystems work. There's experiential semesters, which are multi-month long programs where you're with a peer group and you're usually traveling, not sometimes in the States, sometimes internationally, and you're usually doing multiple types of things. So you might be doing different types of activities. So those programs are really good for students who are not sure what they even like or what they're interested in, because it gives you a wide variety of experiences. Interning, as we know, is kind of a structured work experience, sometimes with little or no pay. And sometimes you think about internships as here, locally in your own community, and that is a great way to get work experience. You can also do internship programs, which hook you up with opportunities in other cities or even abroad. There's experiential courses. Think taking a painting course, learning a language, learning how to rock climb, those kinds of things. Any type of skill or activity that's not for college credit, but it's just for a passion. You can do all sorts of things all over the world. It's really exciting. Studying abroad or more formal courses for credit are definitely an option, although it's something that I don't see as popular because a lot of students are taking gap time to kind of take a break from formal academics. Then there's working, and obviously a lot of people work for part of their gap year to save money to do other things. Some people even work half the year and travel half the year. That's kind of how a lot of people do it in the UK. And a lot of people also work on the bookends of their gap year in the summers. So you may work in the summer after graduation, do different gap year opportunities in the middle, and then work the following summer as well. And you can also actually work legally in other countries. So if you're over 18 and you're an American citizen, you can get working holiday visas in Australia and New Zealand to actually earn money overseas. And then there's also travel, which is kind of the quintessential gap year activity, strapping a backpack on your back, Eurorailing across Europe, or taking a road trip here in the States to visit friends or things like that. So again, a lot of opportunities within this framework that we're talking about. So now I want to give you some stories of students that I know and people who have just had really beneficial gap year experiences and what they did and how they structured it. So Lily here, she really wanted to go as far away as she could, geographically from where she grew up. She grew up in the Boston area. And so her parents were a little bit like, whoa, let's take a breath here. And they had to come together and kind of create some understandings about the types of structure and programs that would give her the right framework so that she could travel far away from home. And so she started her gap year. She worked in the summer. In the fall, she did her first program away from home, which was a service learning semester in the South Pacific. So she got to go to Bali, Sumatra, and some other islands and work and do some community development work in communities. She got to learn how to scuba dive. And all the while, she was with a group of her peers, 12 people, 2 leaders. And so she had this amazing group experience, very highly social, highly structured, highly safe. And then she moved on. She came home for the holidays. The second half of her year, she went to Thailand. She taught in a school in southern Thailand for several months. And then she ended her travel part of her gap time with learning how to surf in Sri Lanka, which is actually the thing that she was most excited for, but was the thing that was the most independent. It was the thing that had the least amount of oversight and structure to it. So it made sense to put that at the end of her year after she had had these other experiences that kind of gave her more travel experience, more savvy when it comes to international travel and how to stay safe and those kinds of things. So when it comes to structuring your year, you kind of want to put the least structured things like traveling or backpacking with friends and stuff at the end of your year after you've done some things that have taught you how to be in the world. And she was, just really excited to start college after her gap time, after having these various experiences. So now we have Andre. Andre grew up in New Orleans, and he decided to spend his gap time serving in New Orleans with City Year, which is an AmeriCorps program that embeds mentors into inner city schools or lower resource schools to provide tutoring and student support to students who are at risk of falling behind. So this is an example of giving back to a community that is your own community. But Andre, he was working in schools that he did not grow up in. So he was still outside of his comfort zone and working in communities that, he didn't grow up in, even though they were in his city. So this showcases the fact that you don't have to go across the world to have an intercultural experience and to have a really, really meaningful gap time. The other really cool thing about AmeriCorps programs is that they're fully funded, so they don't cost you any money, that you get a living stipend, and you also get an education award at the end of your service to put towards higher education. So you can put it towards various certificate programs as well as four-year schools as well. So it's such a great experience to gain skills, to give back in the form of national service, and to have just a meaningful gap time. And even though Andre did a school-based program, AmeriCorps has all sorts of different programs. So you can work in our national parks, you can do trail building, you can do disaster relief, you can do other types of education work that are sports-based or more experiential. So look into that if that's an option for you and you want to go someplace else in the States, but still keep it in the national service category. So then we have Michelle. Michelle's goals for her gap time were that she was a pragmatist. She really wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about her career interests, which were she really wanted to go into nonprofit management and understand more about international development. And she also wanted to learn Spanish. So she spent the first half of her gap time, the fall, learning Spanish in Guatemala at a small language school. And then she came home for the holidays, and after the holidays, she went to Oaxaca, Mexico, and interned at a small women's microfinance organization where she got to go out into these communities and interview women who had received microfinance loans and kind of measure the efficacy and the outcomes of these loan distributions. So it was it was just a wonderful way for her to explore that career interest. And then after that internship, she actually traveled on her own for 6 weeks throughout Colombia and Peru, and she went trekking and she went canoeing through the Amazon, as in this picture, and she just had such an adventure. Now, the really cool thing about Michelle's story is that she self-funded her gap time. So her parents gave her their blessing for her to take a gap year, but she was in charge of financing it. And a lot of people wonder if that's even possible. And through working and through receiving grants and through participating in lower cost programs, Michelle was able to do all of this within her own budget. So one of the things I really also want to get across to viewers is that you do not have to spend a lot on your gap time to get a lot out of it. And you can find grants and scholarships and other ways of funding international travel if that's something that you want to do with your gap year. So then we have Jeremy. Jeremy was really politically active in high school and wanted to dedicate his gap year to activism. And he was particularly interested in climate justice. So he got a fellowship with the Sunrise Movement, which is really pushing for policy around climate action. So he did an internship, or he did a fellowship where he lived in Pennsylvania during the midterm elections and was canvassing on behalf of Sunrise. Then he was home for a while, he worked at a bookshop, he also did Birthright to Israel, and then he went back and worked more with the Sunrise Movement for the second half of his gap year as well, where he was touring and speaking and getting involved with legislation around climate action. So very, very powerful year for him. He ended it by working on farms, which is WWOOFing, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So he was actually able to do a work exchange program where he worked on a farm, and in exchange for his 4 hours of labor a day, they gave him free room and board. And he did this in California, but you can do this all over the world. It's a really cool way of traveling. I have a lot of students who do this in Europe, New Zealand, Australia, and Central and South America, all over the place. So, what he got out of his year was, that experience in politics and activism, and really scaffolding those experiences towards what he wants to work in, which is, government eventually. There's lots and lots of opportunities for seniors who want to take gap time to get involved in local, state, and federal election campaign work, issues-based work, and all sorts of other things. There's actually a website, election2020gapyear.com, which has directories, interviews, and all sorts of information about getting involved in this election year. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's a great thing to do on gap time.